Over the years, there have been tons of video game consoles released. While you may not have heard of some of them, even the big three companies in gaming right now are no strangers to failure. While many consoles prosper for years on store shelves, some come and go, never to be seen again, and some never even really see store shelves at all. You're watching Gamerbrain, and today we're taking a look at 11 of the worst video game console flops. Number 11. Philips CDI. Universally known electronics manufacturer Philips was just one of the many companies that decided to throw their hat into the video game console market. What came of that was none other than the Philips CDI in early 1991. The Philips CDI was the classic case of a console that tried to do too much. Obviously its focus was on media, which included CDs, karaoke discs, and educational titles, but it also suffered from having very few titles that would appeal to gamers. Although the console was a colossal failure, during its lifespan Philips somehow managed to enter a deal with Nintendo to produce exclusive titles for their new CD-based console. These games were based on the Super Mario and Legend of Zelda universes, which as many agree are some of the worst games out there. Number 10. Sega 32X. In the early 1990s, Sega and Nintendo were at the top of the world when it comes to video game consoles. But towards the end of 1995, Sega decided to release a string of add-ons for the Sega Genesis that were anything but successful. One of these add-ons in particular stands out, and it was the Sega 32X. Initially released as one of the first 32-bit consoles, the 32X was an add-on that plugged into the top of the Sega Genesis cartridge slot. In theory, at the time, this thing would have given you a relatively cheap way to enter the 32-bit era, but it turned out to just be a system released right before Sega's next console, the Sega Saturn. The Sega Saturn would be released a few months later and come in to sweep this console under the rug, never to be mentioned by Sega again. Number 9. Panasonic 3DO. Released in 1993, and despite the awful name chosen by Panasonic for this console, at its time of release it was seen as pretty cutting edge. Panasonic's first jump into the video game industry was actually the first console ever to use strictly discs only and have no use of a cartridge-based console whatsoever. Panasonic promised this thing would have better graphics and amazing games compared to the competition, but while that all sounds pretty cool on paper, the 3DO came with a price tag of over $700 when it was released, and consumers weren't having any of it. Consoles like the Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis continued to dominate the industry, and the 3DO quickly faded away. Number 8. Atari Jaguar. While of course Atari was a pioneer in the early days of video gaming, their attempt at a comeback to the console marketplace was anything but a hit. Released just 1 month before Panasonic's 3DO, the Jaguar claimed to be the first 64-bit system ever. Although this was only part true, because the console used two 32-bit processors to form something that makes the Nintendo 64 look like the Xbox One. Unpolished graphics and a terrible controller with a keypad that made it look more like a phone than a controller, as well as a lack of games released for the thing, all played a key role in the short lifespan and eventual demise of Atari's last home video game console. Number 7. Nokia N-Gage. While Nokia is particularly known for making some of the most indestructible cell phones out there, they did in fact throw their hat in the video game console ring. The N-Gage set out to combine a cell phone and a video game console, which now might seem like common practice, but in 2003 when this thing came out, the idea of cell phones and video games really hadn't caught on. To be fair, this console was sort of cutting edge when it came out, but Nokia knew how to sell phones, and that's about it. The N-Gage suffered from a cramped button layout, and ended up looking more like a taco than an actual game console. And to top it all off, pretty much every game that came out for this thing suffered horrible, sloppy animation and sound. While a revamped console was released in 2003, the N-Gage had already dug itself a hole that it couldn't get out of with consumers. Number 6. The Nuan. Created by VM Labs and released in 2000, the Nuan was a mix between a game console and, believe it or not, a new thing at the time, but a DVD player. Before the days of the PlayStation 2 with its DVD playback capabilities, and long before Blu-rays existed, this console came out to fuse DVDs and games together. In saying that, sadly like many of the other consoles on this list, the Nuan suffered from a massive lack of third-party support and game releases in general. Consumers weren't willing to spend over $400 on a DVD player that played games, when options like the PS2 and the original Xbox were looming on the horizon. Nuan technology within DVD players faded out rather quickly, and nobody really talks about it anymore, which is probably for good reason. Number 5. Apple Pippin. Believe it or not, yes, Apple did release a video game console. In the early 1990s, Apple partnered with Bandai, a Japanese toy maker and video game company, in order to create the Apple Pippin. While the system advertised a number of features, including online capabilities and a large library of games, 18 titles were actually released for the Pippin, and its online capabilities were primitive to say the least. The processing speed of the Pippin was atrocious, and overall the console was highly unpolished. When Steve Jobs was rehired at Apple in 1997, he discontinued the failing game console, thus putting Apple's tenure in gaming to rest. Number 4. The Ouya. This console sounded so great when it was first announced. Eventually being crowdfunded in its first 24 hours on Kickstarter by the gaming community, the Ouya was released in March of 2013. Even though it was advertised as an affordable console with a huge library of free games, what backers actually got was a console with little more power than your basic Android phone. In addition to having little or no shelf life in stores, reviews quickly circulated about the console and its shortcomings, and it faded away rather quickly along with the entire Ouya brand, eventually being sold off to Razer in early 2015. Number 3. The Phantom. While this console was announced time and time again, it never actually got released. First advertised in 2002, the Phantom was created by none other than Phantom Entertainment, who was a computer keyboard manufacturer at the time. This thing sounded like the perfect console because the Phantom was a PC that was designed for the living room, where it boasted the ability to be able to play any and all PC titles, thus allowing this thing to have a massive library of games right off the bat. It also had the ability to direct download a huge library of games from the internet, which at the time of its announcement was a pretty huge thing. Although it was supposed to come out as a direct competitor to the Xbox 360 in early 2005, gamers seen nothing except a prototype console in May of 2004, a full 2 years after it was announced. A number of lawsuits for the company later ensued, and the Phantom was never released, although we included it on this list just due to the sheer amount of hype surrounding it at the time. Number 2. Tiger Gizmondo. Although it may have been technically superior to any handheld out at the time of its much delayed release in 2005, Tiger's Gizmondo suffered from a hefty $400 price tag. But if you weren't a fan of the $400 option, you could buy a $230 ad-supported model as well. The poor marketing and lack of games for this thing really made it come and go rather quickly, but before the days of the iPhone, this console offered to not only play games, but also play your collection of MP3s and allow you to make calls. Gamers weren't having any of this phone/console hybrid and didn't appreciate its upfront advertising, claiming to be better than the rest. But anybody who bought the Gizmondo felt scammed due to it being discontinued literally just a year after its release. Number 1. Nintendo Virtual Boy. Oh my, the mighty Virtual Boy yet again tops a list of the biggest console flops, and for good reason. The Virtual Boy was developed by the late Gunpei Yokoi, who had previously found success with Nintendo by having invented the highly successful Game Boy line. Despite Nintendo pushing this thing as being the first 3D console out there, its plethora of limitations made it fail to live up to the hype of being the successor to the Game Boy. Games could only be played in 2 colors, which were red and black, and as for the 3D function, this thing was more like pressing a TV, playing a Super Nintendo game up against your face. Players would often experience headaches and eye strains after playing this for a short period of time, and to top it off, the Virtual Boy was advertised as a portable console, but it was anything but that. After releasing just 14 games, Nintendo gave in and discontinued the Virtual Boy a mere 7 months after its release. Alright guys, so there you have it. There's 11 of the biggest console flops out there. Definitely let me know down in the comments below if you ever owned one of these consoles that was featured on this list. And guys, if you want to get more gaming news and stuff like that, be sure to hit us up on Twitter at GamerbrainYT. Posting some pretty cool stuff over there that I find cool throughout the week. And if you guys want to catch up with me on Instagram, I could be posting some cool pictures and stuff like that throughout the summer. So definitely the place to be on the internet. But I really appreciate you guys sticking around, and if you enjoyed this video, remember to smash that like button down below. And if you have an idea for next week's video, definitely leave it in the comments down below. I make sure to read all of those, and if I like your idea, then I'll feature it in next week's video. So thanks guys very much for watching to the end of this video, but this is Tyler from Gamerbrain, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.